Hello and welcome back to Farmacy Shares. This is Vermont Farmers Food Center's cooking show about the vegetables that we're getting in our shares each week. So this is the third week in August, and we're pretty much in the height of summer. We've got carrots, we've finally got some sweet corn in there. We've got some kale, some parsley, some red peppers, cherry tomatoes, all kinds of good stuff. So we thought we'd celebrate this share with a nice entree salad. So Mac Kohler, who's here with me today, he's a wonderful Everyone Eats volunteer and an excellent chef. So he is going to be talking about knife skills, and he's going to be prepping out the salad. And we'll talk about the dressing we're going to make. We're making a nice roasted carrot dressing, and the salad's going to have all kinds of goodies on it too. And then I will be taking the sweet corn and also making a buckwheat corn cake with it. So we've got a nice meal planned for today, and let's get cooking.
Let's get cooking.
Okay. So, I think I just heard the alarm go off too.
Step one.
Yeah, we did some magic prepping in the kitchen. So we've got some carrots roasting and some chickpeas roasting as well.
What do you think?
I think the carrots still feel kind of hard. What do you think?
Yeah, they're crunchy.
Okay, we'll put them back in.
Brown up a bit.
And the chickpeas, we are not going to be blending. They're going to be a wonderful little crunchy, with a little soft center protein pop on top of our salad. For anyone that loves beans, the chickpeas are beautiful to roast. We just did them with some olive oil and roasted them for like 20 minutes, I think. A little salt and pepper to caramelize them as well.
I'm going to put them on for another 7.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm going to start on the corn. What are you going to start on?
I'm going to start by reading the recipe. Which, if I were a good sous chef, I would have done a half dozen times by now.
You are a busy man, too. Mac's been hard at work since the crack of dawn this morning, so this is a nice midday break for him.
You here.
This is some beautiful corn. We're just going to cut it off into a bowl. If you have a bunch pan at home, that's a fun way to kind of get the kernels off the corn. You flip your bundt pan upside down, put the corn stalk in the middle of the bundt, and then just let all of the kernels fall into the well of the pan. But I'm just going to do it here with a simple bowl and just let them all fall into that. So I'm just cutting it, I'm pinching it down with that eagle claw, keeping my thumb tucked back too, and just letting it come right off and it's got a nice little melodic sound, so you can meditate as you're chopping.
Grace, I'm going to start with the kale, since that's the foundation of the whole salad.
Let it marinate.
And let it marinate a little bit, or macerate, as it were. What we're going to do, as you can see in the recipe, we're going to prepare this first by breaking it down. And we'll do that with knife and by hand, so you've got your choice of how you would do it. And then we're going to rub an acid into it, in this case lemon juice. And acid acts on the cells of a vegetable and of a protein too, by basically breaking them open in much the same way that heat does. When you're cooking, you're breaking down cellular material. And when you're macerating a vegetable in this case, you're also gently breaking down the cellular material without using heat or temperature change.
Very, very cool. It's nice to know like the hows and whys of things too, you know?
Yeah. Now that's half the fun of cooking, honestly.
Yeah.
Is having an idea how all of this somehow turns into me. We've got 2 different kinds of kale here, by the way. This is curly leaf kale, which is probably, would you say this is more common? I honestly don't know if you're...
I don't know at this point.
I see Tuscan kale more and more, so maybe it's coming on.
Yeah, maybe they're like neck and neck in the race for popularity at this point.
Neck and neck. Curly kale and Tuscan kale are a classic Italian variety. Both are very woody. If you've ever eaten raw kale, you probably know it's a pretty chewy vegetable, which is one of the reasons macerating helps us along here. And you can't really eat this stem. It's full of lignans and other unpleasant things for the teeth. So we'll want to trim the leaf from the stem. And there are two ways of doing this. Obviously, you can grip it right around down the middle, and it will separate pretty easily from the stem. And this is true of the curly kale as well. And it's, a little painstaking, and you don't need to get it perfect. But that's the process right there for the Tuscan. And the curly leaf is more or less the same idea. You start right at the top, find your split line, and then just gently kind of yank it down there. Now, for those of you who'd like to make yet more use of your knife, and you'll need a sharp one for the following. I'm posting all this stuff, by the way. You can also, either on the cutting board, lay your leaf down and run a sharp knife along the edge and just trim off the stem. And leave whatever margin on the stem you like. It's going back in to grow more kale anyway. And the other way of doing this, if you're feeling really adventurous, is grip the leaf on one side and with your knife very carefully, because you are in this instance cutting in the direction of your fingers, so you want to stay firmly on the other side of the stem. You just basically run down like that, using a sharp blade. And it trims it right off, grabbing the stem, coming in from the side, and don't fumble it like that. Just zip it off like that, and that's a pretty clean cut.
Yeah, nice.
So for expediency's sake, I'm going to do that because it's fastest and I'm kind of used to doing it that way, and hopefully we don't have a bloodletting here, but we'll find out soon enough.
Do you like a lot of people like, I feel like there's a lot of strong opinions about the pieces, the size of the kale in the salad. Do you have
I always think forkable.
Okay.
Like if it fits on a fork, which to me is, I don't know, what do you think, Grace? It's like about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches.
Wow, that's, yeah. I like a bigger piece.
Do you?
I know a lot of people that like very small shredded pieces. So.
Well, we can go either way.
Yeah.
I like it to hold, some but not a lot of dressing.
Yeah.
And the more finely chopped things are, the more surface area you get, and I don't know.
I am cutting this onion up pretty small. This is going to be in our corn cake as well. And I've got my corn, so this is the last veggie I'm prepping for it. And this corn cake is just, it's made just with buckwheat flour and cornmeal. So it's gluten-free, but there's a lot of dairy kind of binding it together. I've made it before with plain Greek yogurt in it, which works really well. You could also do lots of eggs and milk and some melted butter, which is the version we're going to be making here today. So I think that looks pretty nicely minced. I'm just going to twirl that out of my way. I've got a paper towel a wet paper towel underneath of my cutting board, which is the way to kind of keep it in place if you have wobbly hands and a wobbly board. That can be a dangerous combination.
Oh my goodness.
Washing up a bit.
So what do you think of this size?
Yeah, that looks good to me. Yeah. And it will wilt down a bit too.
Yeah.
And if you have a hard time chewing, the smaller you cut your kale, the easier it is to chew. And a lot of people have a hard time with fresh vegetables. But the nice thing about kale is when you cover it in olive oil and the delicious dressing and let it sit for a while, it does get very easy to chew and it softens up quite nicely.
That's a good point. The finer the pieces, the more surface area you get, the more maceration you get, the softer the resulting vegetable is.
Yeah.
And easier to chew, consequently.
Yes. Yeah. That's one thing we hear a lot in our program is a lot of folks have a hard time with the vegetables. Like they love the bag, but it can be hard when you get a tough green like kale. So sautéing it just very quickly with a little olive oil and garlic is really a great way to eat it too.
And those bags don't are often not entirely well broken down. They include a lot of stem material.
Yeah, yep, yeah. Farmers are harvesting very quickly. All right, so I'm gonna get the batter going for the corn cake. It's just 1.5 cups of ground stone meal. Cornmeal. Stone ground cornmeal. Yeah.
A little crunchy.
I think those are gonna blend, yeah.
Yeah, good?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'll
then
put
those will
these-
crisp up as they cool.
Yeah.
So we can
I'll
just
put 'em in a
leave
bowl
that
for
on
you.
just to cool down and then, cool, thanks Mac.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get my stone meal out. Joke, joke, joke. And do you have any thoughts on the different coarseness of cornmeals?
Oh, it all depends on what you're attempting to do.
Yeah.
Again,
yeah.
surface area being kind of a leitmotif for the day. Oh, wait a minute, I gotta stop this thing.
I know, it's hollering at you. I got a medium ground. I was looking for a coarse ground, couldn't find it, but I got a medium ground. The coarser the grind, I feel like for baking, the more flavorful, and especially if you're using lots of things to kind of keep it moist and delicious. Buckwheat flour is a delicious flour that I love. It has kind of like a sweet and nutty texture to it. Really good in pancakes. Like if you're making pancakes, take out, start with a 1/4 cup of your flour mix and then try adding a 1/4 cup of buckwheat in. Oh, it's so good. It also, when I have buckwheat, I like to keep it in the freezer because it does, it's not as processed as white flour. So a lot of the whole grain flours that we bake with, they're not as processed, so they can get rancid pretty quickly. So I just did 1/2 cup of that. It was 1.5 cups of cornmeal, 1/2 cup of buckwheat. We'll have the recipe on the website as well. And also for all of you Farmacy members, these are the newsletter recipes as well, so you can read along in your book. And then I'm just going to do the baking powder, baking soda situation. Gluten-free cooking also tends to have more baking powder than baking soda in it. I think that it needs more of it just helps kind of keep things together more.
Yeah, gluten is the primary protein in wheat, and it's also what, when it gets baked, chains up and forms the structure of a baked good. So if you're going to go gluten-free, you kind of got to come up with something that, like corn, has enough sugar in it to kind of build another type of polymer chain and provide some structure.
Yeah.
And that generally requires a little bit more boost, to your point.
Yeah.
And you asked about preference for cornmeal. I'm with you, Grace. I love the texture of coarse cornmeal.
Oh, I forgot an important ingredient on my end. Could I borrow your salt, please?
Yes, there it is.
Yeah, and I'm going to grab a whisk.
Snaky.
Thank you. So earlier before we started the magic happening, I'm only going to do a little dash here because our folks like low sodium. Mac had boiled some hard-boiled eggs for our entree salad because all entrees in my world tend to have hard-boiled eggs on them.
Need some protein somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Even if it's a pizza. No, not really. Not all entrees. I don't know. But I don't know if you want to talk about how he had some very interesting techniques for hard-boiling eggs. So I guess that I wanted other people to be let in on your processes there.
We're going to pause on the kale for a moment here and switch to the eggs, one of which is completely done here. It's got a little bit of the yellow from the
I'm
other
just
on
going
it.
to put this in the oven to melt.
So that's a relatively clean peel right there. And I just wanted to show you the inside of another. You know how when you hard-boiled eggs, you can sometimes get that ring of kind of green, disagreeably smelly, eggy scent and texture. That's the egg. The yolk has a lot of sulfur in it, and when you cook it, it gets kind of pushed into the proteinaceous layer, the white. And there's a way of avoiding that by gently lowering the temperature as the eggs are cooking, and you do that by however many eggs you want to boil in the pot. You just cover them with enough water to make sure they're covered, and these have been cooling for a little while, and turn the heat off after they've been boiling for a minute, 2, doesn't really matter actually. Just turn the heat off and leave them for about 10 minutes. I don't know if we can see that there. That will gently cook the white through, and we work with obviously good quality eggs. It's worth working with good quality eggs, but any egg
Buy
obviously
local.
is, say again?
Buy local.
Buy local, thank you. We treat eggs carefully because they can harbor pathogens, and those pathogens are in the outermost aspect of the egg. So between the egg and the shell, or between the egg, the protein layer, and that thin white layer of tissue that is just inside the shell, the interstitial layer. And it's possible to decontaminate an egg very quickly by just plunking it in hot water. 150 degrees, 175 degrees will pasteurize that egg, meaning destroy all potential pathogens. So when we're hard boiling an egg, we're basically boiling it to the point where we've killed everything, and then we're just coagulating proteins and finally the fats in the yolk. But we don't want to cook the yolk too fast to avoid pushing that sulfurous, that smelly layer out into the layer between the fat and the protein. You do this by lowering the temperature slowly. Take it off a boil, leave it sit for 10 minutes, maybe 15, maybe 17. At some point, you'll pull the egg out, and you can really leave it until it cools completely, and just crack it open. You'll probably find, depending on the age of the egg, that the shell will release more easily from the white layer. That did not happen in the case when I just showed you, but in most cases, it generally works out a little bit better. And you end up with a thoroughly cooked egg, a less dry yolk, and none of the associated sulfurous stink. There's also a quick technique.
I'm just popping this out of a
Okay.
hot oven.
This may or may not work, but this is something I like to do since I have at least one of this bunch of eggs
Behind.
worked out a little roughly. You can sometimes release the white from the interior of the shell by blowing it off, literally blowing it off. So you do this by opening up a relatively large hole on the blunt end of the egg. Just gently tap it and get some peel going here. And you want to pick up that thin tissue layer between the protein, the white, and the shell. Give yourself a little playroom there. And again, this doesn't necessarily save you any time, but it may produce, odds on favoring it producing a more intact egg. And I can already tell from doing my sharp end of the egg that this one would come out pretty rough. Do you have a sense, Grace, of whether or not that's the age of the egg talking, or the freshness of the egg?
Yeah, I really think that the fresher the egg, the more delicate it is. When I had chickens, like no matter how I cooked my eggs, it was always hard to pull the shell off them.
Aha, okay.
So that was,
There goes the train.
it's like we're at VFFC.
So you see what I've done here is I've opened up the blunt end where we've got a pretty good peel, and then I open up the narrow end where we've got a pretty rough peel. So we're going to say that these are probably very fresh eggs. Then, cupping the egg gently but firmly, you're basically going to push on the narrow end toward the fat end with your breath. You're going to blow on it. Now I can feel that egg beginning to yield. I can feel the shell beginning to yield in my hand. And what I do then is just continue cracking, and I'm getting a cleaner peel on here. It's a little more released.
Nice.
Yeah, honestly,
right.
I've seen this work better, but you know, for what it's worth, you can give it a try. It's kind of fun, and every now and again, you get the entire intact egg popping out into your receiving hand. Whoop, just like that.
Nice. we're gonna switch back over to buckwheat corn cake land. I've got my dry mix with the onions and the corn all ready to go. I just made a quick buttermilk, egg, and melted butter blend. And the buttermilk, AKA lemon juice and milk, is what we're using today. So because it's corn cake, we want it to rise really quickly, so I'm waiting to add this. I'm gonna add it right now, and I've got my pan all buttered and ready to go. Just because I melted the butter in here and left a little bit, so you can see it's all coated and ready to cook. Quickly add this, and we'll see the bubbles start to happen. Oop, I forgot to grab a spoon.
Grace, which lemon is mine?
I've got one cut in half over here you can use.
Work.
I
Thank you.
just juiced it with a fork, holding it above the pan so none of the seeds fell in, and
Okay.
I put my seeds off to the side.
Looks like you dealt with the seeds already. Thank you.
Yeah. There might be a few rogue guys hiding out underground, hibernating.
I'll keep an eye out for them.
All right, so here's the corn cake. We're just gonna pour it into the shallower the pan. And actually, can you crank that to 450, if you don't mind? We just want it to cook quickly because it is, we want it to just rise and be ready to go. So I'm gonna just throw this in the oven. And that can just bake for, I think, yeah, 25 to 30 minutes, just like most quick breads. And that's
Ready
good
to go to maceration? The next step in the salad is to begin macerating our
Excuse me.
greens here. A good sign in a cook, actually.
I ate a piece of carrot. I think that's probably what's happening. I will help you cut too.
Okay.
Or actually, I'll start toasting the pepitas. We've got a lot of goodies here.
So these, basically everything you've done, depending on the size of the salad you're going to make, just put it in a large enough bowl to get it and your hands in the equation. And then a couple teaspoons. What do we have? We have 2 teaspoons? Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Oh, 1 teaspoon. Okay.
I'm all about bloops and dashes.
Okay. So we're going to use about a teaspoon of lemon juice. And Grace has already graciously de-seeded this lemon for me.
All right, maybe I'll start on the dressing too.
Okay.
I can get that going for you.
Please. This you just dive in with your hands. You're going to basically just crunch it up. Just get a handful at a time, give it a good squeeze. You're working the acid into the fiber of the vegetable, and you will feel it begin to soften in your hands, and it darkens when it does so. Acid, as you might already know, is an oxidizer, and when vegetables darken at room temperature, they're oxidizing. It's also how they rot and decay.
So what do you tell us about the phrase oxidizing?
Oxidizing is like rust on steel or iron.
Okay.
It is the action of oxygen on the structure of a cell wall, in this case, on the crystalline structure of a piece of metal. Oxidation merely refers to anything that oxygen interacts with that produces a byproduct. In the case of iron, it would be iron oxide. In the case of kale, I don't know what it produces, but one thing it does do in breaking down the cell wall is allow a little bit of that acid into the vegetable cell space. And as you can see, it begins to darken a bit as we're macerating, which is exactly what we want to have happen here. It's softening the cellular structure of the vegetable and will produce a more toothsome
Ooh, I love that word.
product. So we're just going to let that sit there, and if, like me, you got tiny little slices on your hands, you may want to rinse them fairly quickly because the acid stings a bit.
And I do have these pepitas going. I'm a little, just keep checking them. And then they're just, whenever you start to smell them, they're toasted.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Okay.
And this dressing, we're making the carrots. We roasted these carrots. We're gonna blend them with some olive oil, rice wine vinegar, some ginger, lots of good stuff. Oh, salt and water.
As you can see on the recipe, we're going to need a grated beet here, and that's a very simple proposition.
And this recipe can be, you can change it to however you want. That's the great thing about salads too. Whatever veggies you like to eat, green beans, cucumbers, different like hot peppers would be good. Even if you have little ingredients that you've put up with your harvest, like pickled onions. There's a million ways you can go. You can add deli meat.
Pickled onions would be great in this.
Yeah.
Pickled onions and kale, macerated kale.
Yeah, yeah. You can even add like seaweed, like dried seaweed. That would be good. Like you could crumble it into the kale massage.
Like nori sheets?
Yeah, just crumble that in.
Nice.
That would be good with all kinds of things.
Interesting.
So it's just whatever you like to eat.
You mentioned whatever you would like to eat. I used to really dislike beets.
Yeah, like really. What do you mean?
Really would not eat them
make
as a
faces?
kid. I thought beets grew in cans, in sugar syrup, and I couldn't deal with it.
That's a lot of kids like that. That's how they like beets.
Yeah, right. It's not my thing, not my jam, so to speak, as sweet as it was. Then I married a German, and she introduced me to the 1,001 ways of root vegetables and beets.
Yeah.
And they're, root vegetables generally are fabulously nutritious, right? Generally speaking.
They are, yeah. Lots of vitamin C.
Yeah.
They're just so dense. Can you hand me that rice vinegar, please?
You gotcha.
Thanks. We also like adding, I like adding dried fruit to salads as well. If you're using like a harder dry fruit, like dried papaya or something, I would recommend letting that sit in a, is that beeping? Oh, sorry. Let that sit in your dressing to kind of rehydrate it a bit so it's not so chewy and tough.
Well, you're going to be happy with how this is looking though.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So this recipe calls for 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's about 1/4 cup right there. 2 tablespoons. I'm actually going to measure this. Boop. Can't help using that word. All right. And then for the water, I'm just going to start off small with water, and I actually am going to grab a measuring spoon so I don't have to lug this puppy all the way over there.
Here, by the way, is another use for a knife. You can use it to kind of police your workspace. I've got a few lemon seeds and a few bits of stray stem, kale stem, what have you. You can hold the blade down on the board, backstop with your hand, and slide the blade along like a dough scraper, lift things up. And again, if you're addressing yourself to the blade edge, always work away from the edge, never toward. And again, as you're sliding that blade toward you, it's in the space between your hand and the surface you're working on. And then when you clean it off, always wipe downward off of the blade.
Nice. I'm going to let this rip.
All right.
Looks like it can use some more water and olive oil right off the bat. We have 2 kinds of olive oil here because all olive oils are not quite the same. I like to use a more inexpensive one for roasting and then a nicer, fresher one for fresh eating. So I'm putting the nice one in here. And I'm going to add a little bit of more water to it as well. And I think we could probably start getting everything going. Oh, that looks so pretty and colorful. And then after I get this made, I can help get the salad plated. So this still looks pretty thick. You can kind of like, yep, if you look in there, let me pull this off so you guys can see at home. It's pretty thick there.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how you like if you wanted to do dots of dressing on top, this would be ready to go. But I want to do it a little bit thinner.
Would you like me to show anything about the peppers and the carrots and the cutting?
Yeah.
How are we doing time-wise?
I think a lot of people, we hear from people that carrots can be real rolly.
Slippery.
But we should also, we've got the time too.
Yeah, we're running up against it.
Yeah. But yeah, I do want to talk about that. Maybe
Okay.
that, and then we could do some of the peppers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll make it all pretty.
Okay. Why don't I do one of these just to get it done?
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll demo on the other.
I can cut one too. If you want to talk about carrots and that pepper, and
Okay.
I'll do these guys.
Here, let me show the sectioning on that pepper.
This one?
Yeah. Just really quickly, then I'm going to hand this off to Grace for further processing, but peppers are, they're always awkward shapes, and they present a little bit of a difficulty cutting-wise. There are a couple of things that you can do to ease your pain and suffering around peppers, and that's first to take off the top and the bottom, which are usually the knobbiest bits on a pepper. And that leaves you with most of the seed pod. Where are we here? There it is. Most of the seed pod. And
Nice.
Any rotty bits you've got on the outside. That you can just cut in half. Sometimes the seed pod will just pop out for you. Other times it stays put and it stays in the, hanging in the connective tissue here, which you can very easily, and again, because you're cutting toward yourself, you want to be very careful here. You just take your knife edge and work it across the inner surface of the pepper. You take out the membrane and the seed pod and knock out any residual seeds into your compost. Take off the rotty bits here, and you're left with a nice piece of workable pepper. Shall I hand that off to you?
Beautiful, yes. And I just want to give a shout out to Jackie Plew from our very first episode, who shared her hack for chopping cherry tomatoes. She used 2 Tupperware lids and put the tomatoes between and did a slice. So I just did that basically with my hand over the cherry
clever.
tomatoes, and that was a breeze. So thank you, Jackie, for that.
Now here we've got a more awkwardly shaped pepper, which I've just sectioned, and I've got a good usable tail on here. This, as you can see, is going to be a little weird with this big Nakiri knife, so I've got a petty knife here at the ready, and I just basically, as often as I can, working away from the hand that's holding it, I'm just going to clear it out right along the interior surface and pop the membrane and the seed pod out all of a piece. That leaves me with a nice workable piece of pepper. And again, you're going to have more than one membrane on any given section of your pepper. So just work through all of them, and if you don't get everything, don't worry, because the last little bits can be taken out with your fingers. Ooh, we've got a rotty bit in there too. So the next step is we need a fine slice. You want a dice.
I'm just cutting them up into kind of a mix between a dice and a chop. So
Well, I'll show a slice here, a fine slice. The outer aspect of a pepper is, of course, the slick side. And depending on the sharpness of your knife, that's either going to present a problem or not. But guaranteed safe point of access is the interior, which is not slick. Let me show this looking sideways. I'm bracing this knife against the backs of my fingers, which is stabilizing the vegetable and providing a path for the knife to slice. The point here is that you're working against the second 2 flanges, these second 2 joints on these fingers, and you're tucking the tips of your fingers out of the way. So basically what we're looking at is something like this. My fingertips are controlling the vegetable, and I'm getting a nice, even, as thin as I want to go, basically. And once you kind of get the feel for this, your fingers are automatically safe because their job is to touch the vegetable and stabilize it, and they are out of the way of the knife that way. And you can You can do this for pretty much any vegetable, and you can get a very thin slice out of it, which, when you're doing a composed salad like this, can end up looking very pretty. Now we see we've got a little bit of a hole right there. We're just going to go up to that point on a nice part of the veg. Nice even slice. And when we get here, I just work around the rotty bit, toss it in the compost, and continue on. My fingertips are out of the way, and I get a nice, even, controlled slice, free of seeds, free of anything else. How are we doing on our... Oh.
Good. I'm still making friends with this blender.
Oh, that cover is beastly, isn't it?
This reminds me also from last episode, we made the cantaloupe agua fresca with the blender, and it did come out pretty chunky. I did find a sieve here, and that would actually help too. If you're making that recipe, you just pour it through a fine meshed colander just to hold all those chunky bits out, and then you get your clean water coming out of that.
What do you think of our maceration?
Looks
is it
nicely massaged.
Yeah.
It's ready for...
Starting to break down?
It's,
Ready for prime time?
yeah.
Okay. You got tomatoes, we got peppers, using currants for the dried fruit.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And those are very soft. I am not a big raisin fan, so I always do currants instead of raisins. But if you love raisins, then you would love having raisins on this salad as well.
What do you think about cranberries?
I love cranberries.
Cranberries would be nice in this too, right?
Yeah. Dried apricots chopped up would be good. Yeah, gosh. I think it depends on, it's always fun to kind of mix and match vegetables and fruit. So if you have some dried peaches, you could kind of nibble on all the veggies in your fridge and see what you think would go well with that. If you wanted to have dried peaches on your salad. So it's just all about what you like, and it's fun to kind of explore what you like and find out how the flavors go together. And that's been cool too for our Farmacy share. Everyone's been getting fruit in the share as well. So that's like there was watermelon, which would be really fun in salad too, and there was arugula in some of the shares, and I'm like, I wonder how those guys
super sweet
would play. Yeah.
fruit with bitter greens like arugula.
Yeah.
That's really nice combo.
And I feel like arugula was so soft and tender looking in the bags, and the melon was so watery, and like maybe those two would be. All right, this lid is giving me issues. There we go. All right, now it's starting to look good. All right, how is that? You want to poke a
That's
some
looking
knife
good.
in that and see
Yeah.
if it's clean? Here. You got one? Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, splatter.
I'd
This is
say
really
5 minutes,
5 more
still a
minutes?
little
Great.
liquid, crisping up nicely on the top.
Nice. I'm going to add some more water to this. I'm going to add a whole shebang this time because
It's just not blenderized.
it's really tasty though. The rice wine vinegar goes really, just holds its own. All right.
How about some fine dice
There's
and corn?
your 40-minute dressing. Just
Yeah.
kidding. It's if you aren't as skittish with liquids as I am in dressings, then it would be much shorter.
Oh, yeah.
What were you saying about the
Oh,
parsley?
how about a little bit of fine dice and some torn leaf?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to start getting this ready to go. I
Composed,
can't keep my
okay.
hands off it. Look at that beautiful kale.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun having the two different flavors together in there too.
And parsley is a nice leaf in its own right, and I always like to throw in a bunch of whole leaves, not merely for flavor, but also for decoration and textural difference too. And that's merely a matter always just pulling it off right at the tip of the last bit of stem that you see. And these are small enough, I don't think, to think, I think.
You think?
I think.
Thanked.
I think. Yeah, what is the past tense of think?
Thunk? No,
Thunk?
thought. It's
Thank?
thought. Isn't it?
What should it be versus what it is? I don't think we need to tear these any more than they're already kind of a nice size for salad. And then we're going to dice, finely mince a little bit just to add that flavor undertone within the salad. Less for texture, more for flavor. These whole leaves are more for texture.
The thing I like about beets too is they actually have a lot of protein in them.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
good
which
point.
people don't know. And kale too has got a lot of protein.
Right.
But because we're making a vegetarian, we're going to add some of these toasted pepitas on top.
Also
And
good protein source?
yeah, you can just kind of sprinkle them however. Yeah, I love nuts and seeds for protein. As well as grilled salmon.
Can I say a little something about proteins and vegetables?
Yeah.
Proteins, as you might know, are comprised of amino acids, and we need a whole pile of different amino acids, some of which are called essential,
Yeah.
which we cannot produce, so we have to get them through our diet.
I'm just going to reach across.
And especially when considering vegetarian eating, it's important to mix things up as much as possible and get a very wide diversity.
That's where
and
variety really is.
exceptionally wide diversity of vegetable types, because you'll get a different complement of amino acids depending on what you're eating. So the pepitas, for example, and nuts generally have a nice sweep of aminos. Beets have a different set of amino acids. You're likely to get what would, who was it who called it a complete protein? Is it Die for a Small Planet? Robbins?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, complete protein means the full suite of amino acids. It's a little tricky to do on a vegan diet, which is why one has to be a little bit more conscientious about the full sweep of potential protein sources.
Oh, that smells like it's done, that buckwheat corn cake.
Oh,
I'm just behind you. Gonna,
want to test?
yeah. Yep,
That
that's
looks
done.
good.
That's done. Perfect. Cancel. Oh, this is a very hot
All off?
pan.
Yes.
Yeah, so here's our beautiful buckwheat corn cake. You can smell
Beautiful.
that sweet corn flavor from the cornmeal. And then we're just going to top it off with some currants.
Let's just top this off with minced parsley.
Yeah. Let's just keep
That's-
chopping it off.
yeah.
We'll need a ladder.
The whole leaf thing is nice, but all right, we're a little bit beyond that point. This is
I
that
think it
same.
still looks pretty with all the colors.
Oh, it looks
It's a
beautiful.
rainbow.
This is that same technique, using the side of the fingers to get the knife. And this is one of the reasons vegetable knives are as tall as they are, is because that's a good technique for getting at and finely working down pretty much anything. Having done that initial slice, now I can just go crosswise to that and get a pretty fine mince straight up. Whenever you're scraping things together with a knife, use the back of the knife.
Yes.
And with a Mercury, you can use the front
That's
edge of it
like nails
too.
on a chalkboard when the front of the knife is being
Oh
used.
my goodness, and it wrecks your knife.
I'm going to let this cool, but we can take a picture of the corn cake later as well. And I just put some of our crunchy chickpeas with a little soft center on the salad as well. They're so good.
How would you like your parsley arrayed?
Oh, yeah, just beautifully. There you go. Yeah.
We'll do a little
Awesome. Thank you, Mac.
runniness there.
So this is a salad built for two. So thank you so much for joining me today.
It came out all right,
Look at
didn't
that.
it?
Yeah, beautiful salad.
Yeah.
All with our share bag and a few extra friends joining us as well. And yeah, so thank you all, and we had a great summer with you, and we'll see you in the fall.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for
it was
coming.
fun.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.